Just give it a moment. Excuse me. Got a little time here, about 45, 50 minutes during lunch break. Thought I'd go live today because I had a request yesterday on Beatles channel where people said they might enjoy watching some player creation. So I thought I might dig a little bit deeper into just kind of how I go about creating players for some of my projects and then getting them in the game and maybe kind of demo the actual build of that. See if anybody cares. We got some yeses yesterday when he did a poll to see if anybody wanted to go through that. So we'll hang out here and see if we get anybody popping on live. I've got somebody coming in. Don't know who yet, but give it a minute. Oh, we got Robbie and Forever Remain 90. Say hello. I thought I've got some time to kill here for about 50 minutes. Then I'll have to run, but I thought I could just go over some player creation and action. Talk about kind of my methodology on how I call it crunching numbers, right? How I crunch the data. But then there's also the manual piece of, opening the game, creating the player, and getting all of the data that I've crunched into the game and get the player represented. So we are here, Robbie says. Very cool. So give it a minute and let people come up. See who else is bored during the middle of the day or anybody else has a break to watch. In fact, I was just looking at my history collection. I had a runtime error the other day. Now I can go in here and do my player search. And who was I looking for? Tony Gwynn the other day, I think. Just taking a peek at the different Tony Gwynns, right? This is the one I'm not caring so much about. How about the dad? Tony Gwynn Sr. And this is just an example of the card that's in there for the action history collection. So cool to see that I solved my runtime error that I had going on, and I can um, look at this because I do use this. I have the history collection, and I like to do it for what ifs, and I also like to take a look and see how did action rate these players for a specific, whatever those years might be, the career slice. And you can see Gwynn 350 batter with whatever years they're using, and we go over to field. They've got them range rated at a 7 for center and right, and outfield arm of 5, and then they've kind of averaged the fielding data for the years that are using, whatever years those might be. But I use this as a resource. I'm always interested after I crunch my numbers to go pull this up and see, ooh, um, am I off a little bit? Which I'm probably going to be because I'm using multiple sources, and I'm also really looking at fan graphs and some of my other stuff for the specific 3 years that I'm choosing. So there usually is a little bit of variation. Great. So let's get into some player. Anybody have any specific questions on player creation? Throw them in the chat. I thought I would just maybe walk through. I'm working on the Negro League file, and I went and got all my data so I can start looking at what's available as far as the Negro Leagues to as a baseline to make sure that as I'm converting them and bringing them over into the major league equivalencies here and bringing them into a file that where I can work with them along with major league players that the formulas are working out right. Many of you know that Satchel Paige struck out a whole lot of people over there, and I think I found out um, the reason why his are probably a little bit high and need to be bumped down. So it's making it fun for me. But I will share what I do when I create a player in action. And again, I just got the action game up here where I have the baseball history collection, so we can search for. Hey, let's pull up Ty Cobb, right? Take a look at Cobb. We got Ty Cobb, and we can see this is his rating for the years they're using. They got him signed in 1915. He's 374 average, 7 outfield arm. We look at fielding, so they've got him ranged at a center 8, right field 8, 7 arm. So little indication this is how action has him rated for their baseball historical career slice section. Let me pull over my many sheets that I work with here and hopefully not bore everybody to death. Yeah, Robbie, Satch needs a little bit of nerfing. Yeah. And I can tell you that I have, this is a file I use right here. I'll call this like our baseball. Maybe I can blow this up for people a little bit. I've got so many tabs on this thing, right? So a lot of you that are familiar with my 5-year teams, I have a master list of the teams I've built. And then if we look at the 5-year team data, I could go down to my Dodgers and you'll start seeing how I've a lot of the basic team information. So here's one I have yet to create, which is the 2013 to 17 Dodgers. And this is how I'll just get the data that I need, right? I'm going to indicate which years I'm going to use. I'm then going to go in here, and since I'm using 2 consecutive years, it was pretty easy to go into Baseball Reference, and I can pull that up right here. And if you go into Baseball Reference and you know the 2 years you want, you can just go over here. I'm going to use 27 and 28, and it automatically averages those lines out for you. So it's easy when you're compiling data. Now, if you've got, it's a little bit more difficult if you're not going to export data out. If you wanted to select, like for my um, league here, I've got Gabby Hartnett, and I'm going to use, I think it's 28, 30, and 35. So in my approach, I've got to figure out, okay, I'm going to use the best 3 years. What are those 3 years? So I'll come over here and look at OPS as a good indication of their batting, and then see if it was at least a year that was had some, a substantial amount of games played. I might look at some other factors too. If it's a position player that maybe by taking another year that's close, it gives them the ability to be rated at another position. So, I spent some time kind of figuring out what those 3 years are. Once I get those 3 years done, then I come over here to my sheet, and I'm going to go back to my Major League Greats I'm working on here. And these are the ones that I've got done so far. And the next one I'm doing here is Gabby Hartnett. And you can see I filled in a lot of the basic information. So when I go in and create them into the action game, a new thing is they're adding height and weight, which has been a field that's been there for a while. I've never used it. So I thought, hey, if I'm going to build these from scratch, let's put in all the detail I can. I'm dropping information here so I can filter this later and figure out what league they're assigned to, because I have a template card that either has the AL or NL logo. I know there was a uniform number from the years he played, right? A nickname. This is the base year I'm going to assign him to, and I've just taken the 3 years I'm going to use, and I divide by 3, and it comes out to about a 1931 average. So that's the year I'm going to place him in, and I'm going to guide all of his stat data, his neutralizing, and his park factors to that specific year. So once I know that, then I can come over here to another sheet where I have some formulas over here. And you can see up here, I'll be working with, I've got his name up here, tell me the years I'm going to use. And I've already pre-filled this in so you don't have to watch me type. But I've put in all this data for his batting for those 3 years. And then right here, this will give me the average that I want. And the same thing with the split data. And I'll either get this, usually a combination of 2 things. I'll get it at these sites right here. I'll get it right here from Baseball Reference, and or I go over here to Gabby Hartnett, and maybe there's some information here that's not in Baseball Reference. For example, on some of these older seasons, grounded into double play, caught stealings, whatever. I'll go and make sure that I've got all that information filled in. And then when I come over here and I want to do split data, this is where I get the split data. So when I'm looking at entering my versus lefty right here, this is where I get it. So I go to my sheet, keep all my formulas, and I went to retro sheet and went to each specific year, put in the raw data. And now I have an average of those 3 right here that I can, it's a starting line for me. The other thing I'm doing is, because it's multiple years and I'm going to assign him to 1931 Wrigley Field, 1931 Wrigley Field right here, there's their ballpark factors, right? So since I'm going to assign him there, I need to know what the average of these ballpark factors was here and to see how far off he is. And if I have to do any tweaking to the stats to get them conformed over to 1931. So instead of me letting the game do all this work, I'm doing it on the front end because if he was 1931, the game knows he put up his numbers in 1931. Since I'm using a combination of seasons, I'm going to take an average and I'm going to gear all of the batting data and all that right over to that year and do all the hard work outside of that. Takes a lot more work, but then I've got accuracy I feel comfortable with that he's now been assigned to 1931. So what do I do with all this fun stuff, right? So I can take this line right here, come back over here to my main sheet where I capture everything, and I can drop it right there. So now I've got my raw, well, let me drop this in. Looks like I've got something a little bit off over here. Oh yeah, I'm used to grabbing these individually. So I just come over to this sheet here, and then I can drop it in right there. So now I can see, okay, here, if I don't do anything else and I'm just averaging the 3 years and getting the batting splits, this is what that data turns out to be. So that would be his batting slicer, his batting card when I build him. But there's some other things that needs to be done, right? I need to look at these numbers relative to 1931 Gabby Hartnett. So one of the things I'll do is come into, let's go right over here to my, I'm struggling pulling all my stuff up here. Right, I can come over here to Gabby Hartnett. I don't think I'm logged in. Let me log in to my account. And the cool thing is I can go under here under neutralize stats and I can say, hey, okay, I want Gabby Hartnett and I want to put him in 1931 because that's where I'm going to build him from. National League, yes. And then I'm going to go to Chicago, select that and get results. Now what I can do is come in here and take the 3 years I'm using, which is 28, 30, and 1935. And this is wonderful. I can select the roles and then rows and only show those. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take this information now and compare it to the actual line and see what manipulation I have to change, right? And what you might find out here, like if we just take a look at home runs, I've got 58 home runs, I think, sitting right there. So that's about 19 average a year, almost at 19 a year. And if I go look at my main line right here, it's showing me, I'll come right in here below and just drop a 19 there. So I'll start dropping the numbers here that show me what the neutralized are and figure out how I have to change this main line. And I can already see his home runs moving him to 1938 is going to drop a little bit. He's got 436 at bats. So I'll come over here and take a look. I'll add up the at bats that that this one has allocated, and we'll notice that he's got 425. So this may not be too bad off, right? And so this is what I do. I'd come through here, average up the hits on the neutralized, and I'd create a whole new neutralized stat line right here, and then see how that impacted this. And if it dropped the batting average down, let's say it dropped it down 10 points, I would make sure that for the lefty splits, I would apply the same ratio over here. In other words, meaning, hey, we know he's going to bat 337 against lefties in a regular season. If this main batting average drops down so many points, this will drop down in relationship to the at-bats as well. So it's just trying to care for getting it as accurate as possible based on all the seasons they came from and where they're going to. So I'm going to stop for a minute, see if anybody's got any questions on this. Is kind of the boring stuff, some of the data behind how these folks are made. The next piece of that would be, after I've gone through here and done these, is going over here to the fielding component and taking a look at, now I'll go and look at those 3 years and add up their fielding stuff. So for Gabby Hartnett, the nice thing, if we go in here and look at, we can come over here under advanced and go to his fielding stats. I can come down here, and this is what makes it nice. I can click on the ones I want to see: 1928, 1930. Now I'm even forgetting which ones I'm using. Look at this. 30 and 35, right? So we'll go 1928, 30, and then I come down here to 35. Really only played catcher. Then I hit show just those selected rows, and then that's where I would come in here and divide by 3 and add all of this data right into my fielding information right here, right? I've already got some ratings that I've looked up on my charts to figure out where I'm going to go. I know I'm pretty solid. I'm going to give him a 7 and either a 7 or 8 in the arm. I'm still deciding on that. So sometimes when I may come back and look at it, I'll put like a 7.5 if that's the average of some of the sources I'm using. And that actually very interesting. Al says, yeah, this is anatomy of the homebrew, right? So that's how I do it. And then once it's done and it's ready to build, so to build in the game, you really need, for a batter, you need all this good information, right? You can shortcut this a little if you own discs and you bring in an existing player, like import them, but then you have to clean out all of their current data because you're basically putting all new information in, right? So I don't know if that's really a time saver or not. I don't think it is because it's not very hard to type in, height, weight, first name, last name, and that kind of stuff. It's pretty easy to do. And then you get to assign what year um, that they're coming from, the year in the park. So good stuff there. Sam Rice will be the next one I do. But yeah, I just use the next line down here as I do all the neutralized stats, and we'll see how he changes. And just for grins and giggles here, I won't bore you with all this because I want to show you what it's like to actually build the player into action. Let's go back to, there's my Discord. Let's go back to this one right here. We can go back to the stats, right? So if I take a look, I know how many at-bats he's had. And if I look at this, looks like 398 to me. I'm pretty good at adding these stuff, right? So it's about 132.6. So I'll come back here and I'll say 132.6 is 133. And then since I'm rounding up, I'll pop this up one number to 426. And now if I look at that, that's letting me know after neutralizing all those years and putting him into that one specific year in 1931, this is what his batting average will be. So you can see it's dropping because I'm using a combination. Oh, it's probably got too many. Yeah. I got to go down and get all my cell formats done well. Oh my gosh. How about this, Steve? There we go. So I know right now, before I get this to be a final line in building, that he's going to be reduced slightly, his batting average. I'll do the same thing. I'll then go look at out of the 133, so out of 144 hits, 30 were doubles. And I'll come over here and use that same ratio. And let's take a look at that. So he's got hits here. You've got 370. So you've got what, 398, right? And his doubles is 81. 81 divided by 398 gives me a ratio of like 0.203. So then if I come back over here and I multiply that 0.203 times 133, because that's his new number of hits, it's showing me that that's the appropriate number of doubles, and so on. So there's a lot of manual, what I call crunching with the homebrew. So like when you lift the hood up, there's a lot of data and a little bit of art to it, right? This is some of the hardcore data to it, but then I think fielding rating starts being a little bit more art because there are some subjective things that you can look at. I'll give you an example. If somebody's like, hey, Roger Peckinpah at shortstop, 16, 17, and 19, was he any good? Well, I don't know. Let's see. One thing I can do is I can come over here and I use the history collection with Action as a great resource. Let's see what they rated him. Well, they've got him as a 9 shortstop. Okay. Let's go take a look at Fangraphs. Now they're doing it on whatever slice. I still don't know the number of years. That's their own proprietary approach. But for me, I'm looking at Peckinpah right here, 16, 17, and 19. So I will come here, come right over here to one of my favorite sites, Fangraphs, and we'll type in Roger Peckinpah, right? There he is. And I can go to fielding, and I can start looking at his total zone rating here, 16, 17, and 19. I'll look at it. Anything, like maybe -1, 0, and 1, I consider average, which for me, I rate about a 6 in action. But you can see here, this is above average. 16, 17, and then really 19 with 15. So I would probably look at this, and I'm very familiar because I know kind of historically what these numbers are and how what I've used to allocate, like how many runs above I would want to see to be like a 7, an 8, a 9, or like a 10, a Gold Glover. And to me, if I'm rating Peckinpah, just looking at these numbers, I would probably have him as an 8. Okay. Now, if I was doing a 2-year slice and I was using 18 and 19, I'd probably rate him a 9, possibly a 10, based on how many of these run save numbers are above the average for that year. So there's a lot that goes into it. And like batting average, I think some people will say, why he was a great batter, or why is a fielder a 9 or a 10 one year and only a 7 another? Well, why is a batter bat 350 one year and only 290 the other year? It's the same thing. You could look at a whole career and see that, man, overall he was a great fielder. But in a couple years, he was just really flashing leather. Here's another one right here, right? And then maybe some other ones like where he's just one, where he might have been a 6 or a 7. Some other ones he might be a 9 or 10. So, I try to be as accurate as I can coming here and looking at the specific years. And that's how this is kind of my ultimate, I have a bunch of old sheets that have ratings from the old ratings from DMB that were the 5: poor, fair, average, very good, excellent. I have some other game engines and stuff. I have some other rating sites. I have documents have here from Michael Humphrey's book on wizardry and about a lot of other stuff. But I'll come here to Fangraphs once I've looked at all that information I have, and this will kind of be my ultimate decision to say, did these numbers back up what I think I'm going to give this person? Should they be bumped up or down? So right here, Action's got him a 7. I don't know what years they're using. They might be using a bigger slice here where they've come over here and said, yeah, I think he's a little above average. I think he's a little bit more than above average. I feel good putting him at an 8. So I would come over here on my sheet. I'm going over to my fielding numbers, and I know that for Peckinpah, I know he's going to be a shortstop, and I'm going to just temporarily put a 6 in here on the rating. Double play factor is a little bit different. And I think Action uses the same formula. Like a double play usually for them seems to be a 7 about average versus a 6 for that. But again, that's looking at the number of double plays they made and their total chances per that league average, right? And seeing if they're kind of way above or way below. So again, that's something that I look at a little bit later, but just a little bit of insight into how I go about all the ratings, right? Batting, it's easy if you're doing a known season because you just grab the batting numbers and you put them in, but you don't have to do that because Action offers the season. So just buy the season. But when I'm doing things, I'm either using 2 straight years, 3 straight years, 3 straight years from anywhere like this. So it requires me to go grab that information, consolidate it, and then look at it in the proper context, if that makes sense, right? So just because that line's there, the line Hartnett has in the 30s, you can't equivalently compare that to somebody in a different era, right? And because you're using multiple seasons, you need to get it down and maneuver all of his data to that specific era that you're going to put him in that year in the ballpark so that both are factored in appropriately. So let me take a look at chat. I had that shut down while I'm flipping windows everywhere. This is more like lunch and early dinner chat. Ignored the notification. Well, hey, I'm in mountain time, so it's 12:34 p.m. my time. Glad to see you, Big Clues here. Al's here, Midlife Crisis. Just giving up some of the information on how I go about creating players and having a lunch chat. So had a little free time here for lunch. Happy to answer questions if anybody has them. So again, once I'm going to pull up Action now and build some. I've got the batting numbers, and maybe I can increase this a little bit so it looks bigger for everybody. They can see it. I got fielding data right here, and I have not created any of these major league players yet. So you get to see me create the first one as a test. Then for pitchers, we've got different information. So for pitchers, I have to do basically the same thing for batter. I use the same sources, right? Get their average line versus lefties, all that good stuff, and then go run the neutralized tool over at StatHeads to tell them what year. So you'll see right here, I've just taken, here's Wes Farrell. I think we had was it Big Clue that was asking for Wes Farrell? Somebody was yesterday. I had to go through and decide, hey, I'm using 30, 32, and 35. That's how I'm going to create the slice for peak, my peak approach here. That averages to 1933. So I know that once I get all these basic lines done, I had to then go back and look at what these three stats would be, 3 years pushed into 1933 Cleveland. And what's interesting is I think 2 of these seasons come with Cleveland, and the other one comes from Boston, from Fenway. And so he's all ready to be built. The other thing with pitchers you need is you got to have fielding data for them. So I have another site here where I'll come in here and get the fielding data that you'll have to fill out in the game, right? Which is having to assign a range and a hold number, but the rest of this would just be raw numbers you get from averaging the 3 years of their putouts, assists, errors, and double plays. Then the other thing for pitchers, and this is where it takes time with non-DH stuff, is this. They got to have a batting line. So let's pull this up, and you can kind of see here that these are the pitchers I have rated. These are completely done, ready to build. You see Wes Farrell's a hell of a batter, batting 298 with 3 home runs and 132 at bats. I think he was really better, right, hitter than most people think. I mean, Walter Johnson, 252 hitter is nice up here. But yeah, Wes Farrell, nice pitcher. So I've got everything I need to create these pitchers and these batters right over here, right? First one I did was Lou Gehrig, and then I have notes here to myself whether I think I've pretty much, these are the ones I'm gonna do. I have photos, I believe. In fact, let me just check this now. This is just to keep track of my template, my photo cards. I have photos for everybody done, I think right up to here. So even though I haven't built them in action, I know I've already got my photo cards ready to go. And then this when I know that this line has been neutralized and converted over, I can take this down to everybody but Hartman. Just need to update. That lets me know that I've handled all that. Still need to go back in here and grab some height and weight. So let's go build somebody while I've got some time. So I'll move this over to the side and let's fire up action here. Oh, it is fired up. So let's go here to a season. Minimize this a little so I can see the chat down here. And oh, we got 6 people in here, man. Thanks everybody for joining. So let me pick season. So I've got MLB Greats, and I've got one called Player Build. And this is where I'm going to go initially start to build the players, and then if I need to do any estimation, I can. So I've created teams for the original franchises, right? This is all, I'm working on players right now that would match up with the Negro League. So anybody really pre-1950, that's what I'm looking at. So I decided, hey, if I'm going to build these players, I want to assemble them on the team that I'm going to use them for. So if we go over here and look at, let's build somebody, right? Maybe we'll build Tris Speaker right here. I've got all his stuff done. So I know he's going to be the bulk of the 3 years I'm using. This is the franchise I'm going to assign him to just so that he can show up on a roster. So Cleveland. So I'll move this working sheet out of here and I'll go into Cleveland. You pull up the team. It's a blank team right now. Now we've got a couple options. I could go player. I could import player. Okay. Which means I can import, if you own a previous season file and you know Tris Speaker's out there somewhere, I could import him from whatever file that is. And if you do that, you can just pull up. I own pretty much every season Action has. But let's say as a shortcut, I want to use speaker for 1916, right? So let's go to 1916, and Cleveland is where he'll be. And let's go find him. Bam, there he is, Tris Speaker. Let's import him and see what happens. So I've imported him. Go to batters, and there he shows. The problem is I've imported him, and when I pull up Tris Speaker, he's showing 1916, which is great, okay? And it's given me the park he's going to be assigned to, right? But none of his information, none of his data is relevant. It's meaningless to me. So if you're going to do an all-time great league with single years, and you have a variety of uh, files to choose from or whatever, easy. You could sit here and import and create them very easily in Action. But for what I do, it's meaningless because I have all new data form, ratings, and stat lines. So if I wanted to do this as a shortcut, I could bring him in, but I don't know how much time this really saves me, right? Because once he's in, I have to do this. I have to go up to edit, and I can edit his batting, edit reel, and then I have to go clear. So now I've got a clean sheet to enter his batting data. Then I have to go, well, did he pitch any? No, okay, I don't have to edit that. Oh, did he field? Yeah, he fielded, but I'm going to have brand new data for this. So there he is. Here he's in center field. So I can hit Tool, clear all fielding statistics. Boom. So I'm done. So now I've imported him, but I had to go through all those steps to clear out all his data because I'm going to enter all brand new stuff. Okay. Another option is you could take a player and just hit create. Now it's spinning and it pulls up this card. So let's say I was going to create somebody. Let me think of another Cleveland player. I know who we think of. First name Wes, last name Farrell. Short name, I think we'll go with Farrell. There are two. Sometimes if you wanted another one, you could go comma B or comma Wes, whatever. That's kind of how the game approaches it, or you leave it blank. If they have a nickname, you can put that in. I'm taking a look at over on my chart, and that's why I track. I don't see any for him, right? What year am I going to assign him to? Well, I'm going to have to put him to, 1940 or whatever, and then what's his age and put his height and weight in, right? So you can do it this way clean, or you can import if you have him on something else and then just edit him. I don't think there's really any one's faster than the other, if that makes sense. Smelly Wrestling Geek, hey, we got a question. Roughly how many hours a week would you say you devote to this? Oh my gosh, I would be embarrassed. Be embarrassing to say. Any time that I can stay in here and work, I have a home office, luckily, right? And I work from home. I'm on my lunch now. I've got 18 minutes before I got to get back. But I stay in here as often as I can because now that I'm really excited about doing the Negro League project, this major league project with it, similar to the 5-year franchises, it's like my hobby. It's like, hey, if I got 2 or 3 hours, instead of sitting down watching the game, I'll come in here. And I may even pull the game up on my computer screens and do some of that while I work. But it's a lot of hours a week, a lot of my free time hours. Thankfully, I don't have a lot of projects, home projects going on, trips, that kind of stuff. So I'm able to devote it. And I'm very passionate about doing this stuff. So let's go in here and talk about, okay, how are we going to edit players? So I brought in Tris Speaker, or I could create people. Now, how do I get the data in there? I go right here and I usually start off with batting. And I'll pull up my sheet, which you can't see, which is over here on the other side, okay? And there is an import tool that you can choose. I'm just too lazy to do it and trust it. I need to play around with that, but I know that this works well. It's very manual, but I go over to my line there that I have for his adjusted batting stats, and I'm going to put that in. So let's see if I can do this. So when I go to speaker, I have so many windows open up here. Bear with me. It's a pain. Boom, and I'll highlight speaker. So I can come over here and I can get fairly quick with some of this stuff. And I am open to make mistakes, right? So as I go through here, I'm going right off of his line that I have an order on my Excel sheet of the order that I know I'm going to have to input it into this game, right? And I'm not going too fast. I can go actually faster, but I'm trying not to make mistakes. Okay. So I've got all of his good stuff in. Now, if I had a bunch of players here that I'd created, and I could just wait till I create them all and then come in and enter all this data. But if I've done his batting data, now look, his batting data is in. He's listed as a pinch hitter because I haven't done something else. Fielding data. So let's go in and do his fielding data. And then over here on my other screen, I'm just going to flip over to my fielding chart, find a Tris Speaker. I know that he's rated, see where I have him rated, probably just center field, I'm thinking, but I could be wrong. Yep, center field, 151 games. So I just come down here on the position, hit center field, Speaker, 151 games. 363 putouts, 28 assists, 16 errors, 10 double plays, and he is a 9 range, and I've got him as a 9 arm, right? Now, if he was rated other outfield positions, I just come right over here. And so if you look at what I'm doing, this is how I've laid this sheet out. So as I build somebody, if they're at multiple positions, I just go Frankie Frisch. I open up, I select second base, put in the data, then click third base, then click shortstop, move on to the next person. It's easy when it's only one position like Speaker right here. So I just entered all this information. There he is. Now, if I click on his card, I don't have to, luckily with him, I don't have to do any maneuvering. Why? Because I don't have to, I had 1916, so I've kind of a head started. I brought his name in and he's already assigned to this part. But let's say I only had 1914 Speaker and my project needs him assigned to a different year. You know what you do on this card? Look how nice this is. You put your cursor right there and then you left click on it and it opens up the assignment box. And this is telling you, hey, he's American League 1916 and he's in this version of Cleveland Park. Now, if I change any of this, it means that I'm changing the universe he came from. And this is extremely important because the game needs to know where did he put up these stats so that it can do its proper comparison within the engine. So that's easy. So right here, I could say, oh, never mind. I only had 1916. I brought him in, but I'm going to assign him to 1920. And I double click on 20, boom. And now the game thinks all of these numbers came from 1920. So now before I make a mistake, I'll go back and change him back to 16 because that's what he needs to be. And there he is. There he's done. Now the other thing I haven't done yet is, let's go take a look at him. Just hit the modify player information here. Let's take a look at him, right? So the game internally is assigning this note here. So bear with me with the dogs. All right, get out. You're not hanging out with me anymore. This is where you can come back in. So it's already from 1916 knows that this is a common nickname, but if you don't have any of that, this is where I track it. I'd enter all this stuff. Height and weight. I don't know if this is really important to anybody. To me, I'm trying to put as much information I can. It's just what I try to do is be as accurate as I can with all this. He's 5'11", 193, so I can come over here and put 5'11", 193. Got it. The game has some built-in coding that when it sees Tris Speaker, it wants to assign the note MVP in 1925. But you could come down here, erase that, junk it, and put whatever notes you want in here. And that's where I've learned with the Negro League file, I'm using the notes section up here to be able to kind of put more information. It's a 100-character limit. Okay, but you can see it's got all this good stuff here. It's got his base running and all that. And the game will fill this stuff in based on the data you put in. And if there's for some reason, like if you create a player from scratch and there's no existing data, every time that I get a bunch of players on here, I'll always come out here and I'll go to my organize, generate default player ratings, and I will only select the ones that I don't research myself. And it's those. And I've gone over this, I think, before, that fielding range, outfield arm, double play pivot, catcher arm, and pitcher hold rating are all things that I have sources that I go and research, so I manually put those in. But when I hit generate ratings, boom, We come right on over here. And now when we go and look at Cleveland and Tris Speaker, you can start seeing all these things are covered here, right? He's got a base run, stolen base jump, bunt sack, bunt for hit and run. Now these are all editable, right? So as a starting point, I like to kind of run the default, get them there. And then as I get my league files done or teams done, I'll go back and double check that. I may feel like I need to bump up his base running from a 6 to a 7 or an 8 or something like that. These numbers right here, power versus left and right, they're only really reference numbers based on his slugging percentage in that era, right? Like how much power, how much extra base power does he have? These don't really factor in the game. They're just there to give you a visual clue because his actual numbers are what factors in the game. So you can see here his lefty righty stuff here. So let's go back to that. One thing I didn't show you. Because we have so much lefty righty data now, the game will automatically, when I edited his batting, the game automatically applies like historical splits. Okay. If I look at batting versus left-handed, right, it's automatically assigned that. So let me look at it and see how it did. It says 40, we got 43 divided by 126. Game is going to show him as a 341 hitter to left-handed batter, right, which is the one he bats. But in reality, let me bring him over here. That's great, but he was better than that. Look at this. The real data and split show that he should be a 368, which is, he batted really good against left-handers for a left-handed player, right? So I don't want the game to use that. I want it to be accurate. So I'll come over here and clear a spreadsheet. And yes, I'm sure. And I can come in here and I can say, I don't need the game generated default stuff. I've got the real things. 12, 2, 15, 23, 4, 5, 0, 3. So now I've put him, oh, wait a minute. See how tedious this is? I'm looking at the wrong stuff. So he's got 53. It's 12, 2, 2. And we got 19, 23, 4, 5, 0, 3. 3. So there we go. So now when we go look at him, we have the right data in there. He should be a 368 hitter against left-handed. So he's better than what the, average that all, the formula they would use when you don't have that information. And there's some season when you get really early, especially with pitchers before the late teens, a lot of the pitcher versus lefty data isn't there. And then you have to use the estimator, which is fine because the game will allow you to go in there and do estimated splits, which is fine. But if I've got the real numbers, I'm going to use the real numbers. So we click on speaker. Yeah, there we go. Now he's now versus lefty, 368. That's what he should be because that's what his data was, right? And how long does it take me to complete one player then? Well, you just kind of saw me. I mean, what I could do is come in here once I have, since they're not all on the same team, like when I do a 5-year file, I'll create a file and I'll have 30 players, let's say, to put on that roster. So it's all the same team. So I can come in here and either import players and delete all their information and do it, or create a bunch and then just start pulling up the forms. If I've got 20 players ready to go, I can just go edit batting and then I can keep this sheet up and just start spitting through players, right? And get all the batting done. Then I can go get batting versus left, then fielding. For pitchers, there's pitching versus left, pitching fielding, and then pitching batting and pitching batting versus left. So with pitchers, there's just more forms and information to fill out. But it can take a while to do one player. Because there's the research and getting them all rated and getting the info. Then there's the act of pulling this up and actually building them in the game. And there is an import tool where you can export. Let's see. Oh gosh, what is it? Import. You can import a user-created player spreadsheet. But these are all the fields that are on it. And I haven't messed with it yet. I need to try this out because maybe I'll find if I just break my habit that if I put it all on this sheet, I won't have to do the manual entry, but I'm so used to doing the manual entry and it gives me an extra chance to look at my data, because sometimes as I'm typing it, I know what's weird. Like if there's been a typo, I've done it so much, I know if there's like, oh, wait a minute, that's way too many hits for this many at bats, or there's no reason there should be 20. 22 isn't the right number for, hit by pitch or whatever it might be. So that's something I need to look into, but there is that import thing that you can fill out all the fields and then bring it in. But I think you have to have a team ready for them, and then make sure when you bring them in, um, it matches a team so that they know where to put them and things like that. I have not played with that at all. Big Clue, glad you were here. Getting ready to start some training. Nice. Yeah, he's got Big Clue is teaching some folks now. Way to go. So you have now, and if I don't have any need for this player right now, I can. So now I've just created the first player for my Major League Greats disc. And so this is what he'll look like, best 3 years to average, neutralized, and all that good stuff. A 375 hit and triss speaker with a 992 OPS, and plays center field. So that's about as good as it gets on player creation. I forgot to mention too, there are also, and ballpark factors too, right? And I think I've gone over that before, and making some tweaks there. That goes into how I adjust their main stat line, the neutralized information, and then I'm looking at the park data. Because I know a lot of questions come up. Well, how do we care for this with parks? So you'll see right here. I know, like for Hartnett that I'm working on now, he's in Wrigley, which is version 1 at these 3 years, and this is all of their data. So if you look at the numbers out of action, I've converted seam heads because they use, like for seam heads, this would look different. They're using it in terms of 100, but 100 is just average. So action just takes what's above or below 100. And for 1928, you can see for left-handed person's getting suppressed quite a bit. Hits is down 12%, doubles 9, triples 27, and 34 for lefties. But even righties are getting suppressed. So it's pretty much, you can tell. That tells me Wrigley back in those days is not a hitter's park at all. Because the average of all these, maybe for right-handed, just a hair. I don't really read too much into that. Doubles a little bit, but yeah, maybe it's a combo now that I'm looking at it. So you've got 1 year. It's really interesting, right? Your homers versus left 1 year is down 34%, but the other two I'm using, it's up 24. Go figure, right? But what I want him to be is this is where he's assigned, right? So what's the difference? So if we take a look at all that, right? The average is 4.3. So if I'm averaging that, I'm sitting here saying, here's the average is 4. So there might be a little bit slight adjustment. 4% is what he averages, and he's going to a year with 1, so maybe he's got to be tweaked down a little bit. Same thing with here. That's a minus 22. Right? So it's kind of, I could put a formula on here to look at these, but you can see what the average of those are and how close 31 already is to that. But there's still some minor tweaking here to maybe bump a double up or down or a batting average a little bit, right? So what's the average there? 8.6 or 9. So you can see that if I'm putting him in 1931, I'm gonna have to tweak. I'll have to tweak him a little bit here, right? Sometimes it's not that far off. Anyway, this is all the some nuts and bolts behind the scene, but had some time and glad everybody could join me for just a quick midday lunch. Maybe I'll do these a couple of times a week or just come in here and do some quick hits at lunchtime for entertainment. Wish I had longer. I know I think Beatles set a record yesterday, 7.5 hours or something like that. That's crazy. But I do have some real work to get back to. So glad everybody could join us. But my goal is if there's any things you want to see, let me know. This is stuff I love doing as much as playing the game. Is all the research behind this and putting the teams together and having fun. But as I assemble these major league greats, I'll be throwing them on these franchise teams just so I can kind of see them and figure out what to do with them later. Hopefully, within the next week, by the end of the weekend, I'll have a 25 or so players built in here that I can then assemble a team and have a game maybe against the Negro League players or mix them, do some barnstorming or whatever. That would be um, that would be really fun. But thanks for everybody showing up, and I'll see you down the road.